العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. قل ربي زدني واللذان يأتيانها منكم فآذوهما فإن تابا وأصلحا فأعرضوا عنهما إن الله كان توابا رحيما. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. So after a bit of a cut-off here, we'll return back to Surah An-Nisa, and after of course mentioning many of the various regulations concerning, most of the regulations concerning inheritance and other important injunctions of Sharia, and highlighting the importance of what we call iffa, chastity and modesty and purity. And of course Islam invites to all things which are chaste and pure and considered, praiseworthy in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, of course, it forbids and instructs away from all that is impure and unchaste and considered abomination by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, previously the mention of the committing of adultery, fornication, outside of wedlock, obviously, the only legal way in Sharia between a male and a female to engage in sexual activity, which of course we mentioned earlier on is a great ni'mat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the means of the ongoing human race, and that's the means in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such a fantastic system. However, outside of that context, it is considered an abomination and a grievous sin. And so whether that's between a man and a woman, or which has become a very unfortunately common norm these days, even between the same sexes, between men and men, women and women, and even worse than lower than that. So all of such things are forbidden in Islam and are abomination in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the universe. And if people disconnect with the creator of the universe, then obviously left with their own machinations, with their own imaginations, with their own skewed and a very limited human intellect, then obviously the human being goes astray. Whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets to go astray, he's misguided. Whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, he's guided. And guidance is that which is found in the Quran and in the Sunnah in Sharia. And so here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَالَّذَانِ يَأْتِيَانِهَا, the two who approach it, meaning the adultery, fornication, illicit sexual activity. Alladhani, the two. So the two, who are the two here? So after mentioning general fornication, so here the two is generally understood to mean the two males who approach such an abomination in homosexual activity. So it is an abomination in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is mentioned explicitly here in the Quran, also in Sunnah, also in the Bible, also in the New Testament, the Old Testament. All religious have somehow, after thousands of years of understanding a particular value in society, now, like everything else, disintegrating in front of our eyes, the moral values and ethics, not only being destroyed, but as Nabi mentioned, a time will come not only when people will leave the enjoining of good and forbidding of evil, they will begin to enjoin the evil and forbid the good. This is what we see today. So similarly, as in the case of fornication, it is mentioned previously that keep them in their houses until either death overtakes them or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala runs up away. And as we mentioned, this is the beginning of Sharia, and this is the hallmark of Sharia in Islam, that it goes by stages. It prepares the minds and the hearts, and then stage by stage until the full legislation, takes place ultimately. And as we mentioned, that took place later in Medina, and ultimately the more difficult the injunction, the more there would be an incremental staging of tashri' or implementation of that sharia, and also later on in the history towards the end. And the more difficult injunctions, we find them in the latter period of the Madani period. And so similarly here in the beginning, there is the order to those who are found committing homosexual acts, they should be given some sort of punishment. It's not specific here. And in Hadith, various things are mentioned, and the Mujtahideen have various views on that. Of course, all of these injunctions and punishments, as we mentioned earlier, and we need to continuously emphasize that, these are implemented in Islamic society, whether it's an Islamic form of government, and such punishments, as we call hudud, are exacted by the government, and they're exacted by those in authority by the Islamic government. If we don't have such a situation, they cannot be applied as such. This requires the order of the government itself. Not everybody can jump up and start enforcing these things. Okay, that's one. So we also wanted to mention some of the ahadith that mention this abomination. And in the meaning of one of the hadith, Allah Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, mentions that there are 7 that that Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has mentioned, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pronounced his curse upon such individuals. And among those individuals are those who perpetrate the actions of the people of Lut. And the people of Lut, obviously, it's well known with the homosexual acts. And Nabi Sallallahu mentioned this 3 times. It was quite sufficient once, but 3 times he mentioned the curse of Allah on the people who do the actions of the people of Lut. The curse be upon 3 times. It's also mentioned, not only that, now we have this issue called gender orientation. This is also, again, nobody heard of such a thing 50 years ago. Of course, there were people who were, who tended to be effeminate. There were women who tended to be more masculine. Sometimes it's a character trait, but it doesn't mean that, so I'm not supposed to be a woman, I'm supposed to be a man, or vice versa. You've been created a man or a woman. There's no third category, unless physically there are what we call al-khuntha in Sharia, which is actually by creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, both genders in a human being. That's a different issue, and that has its own separate rules and regulations in Sharia. Otherwise, a man is a man and a woman is a woman. If you have tendencies otherwise, then you need to work with that and go against that. Just as people have tendencies to steal, they have tendencies to lie, they have tendencies to be iniquitous to their spouses. So we just go ahead, this is the way I feel. That's what it's about today. I feel like this, and so I do it. So my feeling has become Sharia. It's not even intelligence anymore. It is just feeling. The way you feel, that's what we need to do. No, feelings are not what we go by Sharia. So, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam not only cursed the people who engage in that culminate in sexual homosexual actions, but even those among the women who imitate men, and those of the men who imitate women. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam cursed them. So if someone finds someone with those tendencies, then he needs to go through a type of a therapy to correct that situation. And that was the stance of humanity for thousands of years. It's an abomination. Similarly, sexual activities also have become, perverted sexual activities in this day and age have also become prominent, whereas Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has mentioned that may Allah curse that person who approaches his woman in other than the way in which it is ordained by Sharia. In other words, the female organ is to be approached by the male organ and not otherwise, ostensibly from behind in a filthy place where filth excretion takes place. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save such type of things. So only that place where the production of the child is to be expected, and obviously that's quite clear. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam again cursed the people who do such abominable things. Not only those who have homosexual, but even perverted sexual actions which are not ordained in Sharia. These are also the when the woman is in her menstrual cycle. All of these things are to be abstained from. Again, Sharia invites to everything which is pure and wholesome and positive, and prohibits all that is negative and impure and filthy by any way or by any or by any dimension. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding to follow His guidance and don't follow our whims and wills and the